In an age of iron and faith, of soaring cathedrals and shadowed forests, humanity wrestled with a reality that was often harsh, brief, and unforgiving. From the serf toiling in the fields under the relentless sun to the noble lord burdened by the weight of his station, there was a universal yearning for escape, a desire to cast off the shackles of worldly care and forget the soul's heavy troubles. Man has always sought gateways to oblivion, portals to a fleeting paradise. And among the many discovered, one liquid jewel, the color of sunset or liquid gold, has always held a particular and powerful sway: alcohol. In the medieval world, it was the lifeblood of celebration and the dark seed of tragedy. It fueled the warrior's boast in the great hall and whispered temptations to the hermit in his lonely cell. It was the agent of fellowship and the catalyst for damnation. Yet, despite its omnipresence brewed in monasteries, fermented in cellars, and poured freely at every feast and festival, few truly considered the profound peril it posed to the immortal soul. They saw the drunkard stumble in the street, but they did not see the shadows that clung to him. Today, we shall journey back to that time, not merely as historians, but as explorers of the spirit. We will uncover the hidden spiritual consequences of drink, as understood by the mystics, saints, and alchemists of the medieval age. What truly befalls the soul when a man gives himself over to the cup? What warnings did the great spiritual masters of that era leave for us, written in scripture and whispered in cloisters? The story of alcohol is not simply a history of a beverage. It is a profound and cautionary tale interwoven with mankind's eternal quest for the divine, a quest that can be easily led astray down a path of illusion and spiritual decay. To grasp this peril, we must first unearth its deepest secrets, a knowledge that traveled on silk roads and across treacherous seas, from the sun-scorched lands of the East into the minds of Europe's most enigmatic thinkers, the alchemists. The very name for the distilled essence carries a chilling secret. The word, passed down from the learned Arab scholars, was al-kul. To the common man, it may have simply meant a fine powder, but to the alchemist, a seeker of life's quintessence, it signified something far more profound. It was the spiritus, the very soul of a substance, liberated through the fire and heat of the alembic. They believed al-kul literally meant the body-eating spirit, a spectral essence that consumes the vessel that contains it. In their mystical worldview, alcohol became the ultimate symbol of this volatile, ethereal force, a spirit torn from its earthly body of raw matter. Is it any wonder, then, that even centuries later we still refer to these potent distillations as spirits? This was not mere poetry to the medieval mind. It was a statement of fact. To consume such a drink was to invite an outside spirit into the temple of one's own body. The use of fermented drinks, of course, was far older, a legacy inherited from the pagan world. The Romans had their Bacchus, the Greeks their Dionysus, gods of wine, ecstasy, and divine madness. They revered the fruit of the vine as a gift, a bridge to the gods that could unlock the tongue and reveal hidden truths. But even these ancient pagans understood its dual nature. The wise men of antiquity knew that while wine could reveal the true self, it could also shatter reason, leaving the soul's gates unguarded and open to dangerous, malevolent influences. This understanding was absorbed and transformed by the Christian world. While the Church Fathers condemned the wild, orgiastic rites of the old gods, wine itself was elevated to a position of supreme sanctity in the Eucharist, becoming the sacred symbol of Christ's blood and the new covenant. Yet, this only deepened the paradox. If wine could be holy, its abuse was a deeper sacrilege. The same substance that symbolized salvation in a sacred chalice could become an agent of damnation when consumed with gluttonous abandon. The great thinkers of the Church, men like St. Augustine, issued stark warnings. They saw drunkenness not as a simple vice, but as a form of spiritual self-destruction, an act of turning one's back on God's gift of reason and grace. This dual legacy, the alchemist's body-eating spirit and the Church's sacred yet perilous liquid, became deeply ingrained in the medieval psyche. The substance once revered for its divine connection slowly, over centuries of common use and abuse, became something that served the exact opposite purpose, a tool for spiritual disconnection, a gilded key to a prison of the soul. For alcohol is never merely a physical substance that clouds the mind and burdens the liver. Its true and most insidious Work is done on a level unseen, in the subtle realm of the human spirit, a realm that the medieval world understood not through science, but through faith, mysticism, and profound introspection. Every esoteric tradition of the age, from the Gnostic sects to the contemplative orders, agreed on a fundamental truth. Man is not merely flesh and blood. He is a vessel of divine light, a soul cloaked in a physical form, enveloped by a spiritual field of divine protection. This spiritual body, a shield of faith and light, reflects our sanctity and vitality. It is our fortress against the forces of darkness that roam the world seeking the ruin of souls. And it is here, upon the very walls of this spiritual fortress, that alcohol wages its most devastating siege. When a man drinks, the substance enters his physical body, to be sure, altering the humors and clouding the brain. But in the spiritual body, it acts as a corrosive agent, a solvent that dissolves the mortar of faith and weakens the soul's defenses. It creates breaches, tears, and cracks in this luminous shield. The great mystic and abbess Hildegard von Bingen, who saw the world as a symphony of divine energy, argued that excessive drink throws the soul's harmony into a frightful discord, weakening the spirit's connection to the celestial choir and allowing destructive forces to influence the mind and will. This spiritual opening, this breach in the fortress wall, acts as a beacon for malevolent entities. In the medieval understanding, the world was filled with such beings, demons, tempters, and imps that feed on human despair and sin. They are drawn to the weakened aura of a drunkard like flies to rotting meat. These gaps in the soul's armor are especially perilous because they sever our connection to the higher self, to that spark of divine reason that is God's voice within us, our guide and protector. Instead of remaining centered, steadfast in faith, and aligned with virtue, the soul becomes scattered, tossed about like a rudderless ship on a storm-racked sea. The captain reason is drunk and asleep at the helm. This is precisely why so many accounts from the period describe men and women becoming emotionally unstable, spiritually desolate, or mentally tormented after bouts of heavy drinking. It was not seen as a chemical imbalance, but as a spiritual affliction, a possession by despair. The impact on the soul's inner structure, what some mystics might call its spiritual centers, is equally catastrophic. Alcohol tends to violently inflame the lower passions, lust, gluttony, wrath, which are tied to our earthly, animal nature. It stokes the fires of carnal desire. Simultaneously, it dampens the higher faculties, contemplation, piety, and divine love, which connect our consciousness to God and the heavenly realms. This creates a dangerous and tragic imbalance. We begin to seek all our satisfaction in the mud of the material world, while actively shunning the pure light of higher truths. The great scholastic theologians constantly warned of this. In his Summa Theologica, Thomas Aquinas speaks of temperance as a cardinal virtue, essential for keeping the appetites in check so the soul can aspire to God. He understood that anything that clouds the intellect, the soul's eye, is a direct obstacle on the path to salvation. Modern science may now show us scans of reduced activity in the frontal lobes, but the medieval mystics knew this truth through divine insight. Alcohol dims the light of the spirit, extinguishing the clarity needed for true communion with God. This spiritual devastation can also be witnessed in collective environments. When many people gather to drink to excess, such as in a rowdy tavern or a decadent feast, their spiritual energies mingle without order or protection. The very atmosphere of the place grows heavy, its spiritual vibration dropping into a dense and chaotic state. The behavior of the crowd becomes more primal, less human. The shield of individual reason and piety is lowered, and a collective madness can take hold. This is why many monastic orders and pious communities advised avoiding such environments, recognizing the spiritual risk not only for the individual soul but for the collective as well. But even in this grim tapestry, there is a thread of hope, for the human spirit, created in God's image, is possessed of an incredible resilience. Through acts of penance, sincere prayer, fasting, and a conscious turning of the will back towards God, it is possible to repair the damage to the soul's fortress and restore its sacred balance. But this requires a profound effort, a deliberate choice to rise above the impulses of the flesh and return to a life of virtue and alignment with the divine. By understanding the true spiritual cost of the cup, you can begin to make a more conscious choice. A choice that brings you closer to the divine being you were created to be. Is the fleeting pleasure of a draught of ale worth the spiritual peril, the disconnection it creates from your own immortal essence? There is an irresistible allure that alcohol has held over mankind for centuries. It has been a cornerstone of feasts, a seal for oaths, a medium for fellowship, and a dark comfort for the lonely. But why? Why, despite witnessing its ruinous effects on body and soul, are we so inexorably drawn to it? What lies behind this shimmering, intoxicating illusion that makes us crave the very thing we know, in the quietest corners of our hearts, will bring us harm? At the very core of this powerful attraction lies a deep and painful disconnection from our true nature, from the divine source of our being. Since time immemorial, man has sought to escape the limitations of his mortal coil, the relentless toil, and the gnawing awareness of his own mortality. The frantic pursuit of immediate pleasure and the desperate flight from existential pain are woven into the fabric of the human condition. Alcohol presents itself as the simplest solution, a magical potion from a witch's cauldron, promising to lighten the crushing burdens of life and transport us, if only for a few fleeting hours, to a state of ecstatic, carefree freedom. But this, as the wisest church fathers and holiest hermits knew, is merely the devil's most clever illusion. Alcohol offers a false salvation, a counterfeit of true joy and freedom. When consumed, it intoxicates. It creates a temporary, fleeting awakening from the stupor of daily suffering. Feelings of anxiety, fear, and insecurity seem to melt away like snow in the spring sun. A surge of false confidence swells in the chest. The tongue is loosened, the heart feels brave, the world seems brighter. But these sensations are ephemeral, as transient as morning mist. They deceive us, whispering lies that we are free when, in truth, we are drifting ever further from our spiritual anchor, becoming more deeply enslaved to the passions of the flesh. The ancient Hermetic traditions, whose secret knowledge trickled into medieval Europe, taught that humanity is in a constant, often unconscious, search for the unus mundus, the primordial unity, a state of perfect harmony with the cosmos and its creator. When we turn to alcohol to fill the cavernous void within our souls, we are making a tragic and misguided choice. We seek that divine unity outside of ourselves, in a substance that is ephemeral, earthly, and by its very nature diminishes us. Alcohol forges a false link to that feeling of wholeness, but the link is forged of smoke. It is brittle and fleeting, and when it inevitably shatters, it leaves us emptier, more desolate, and more spiritually impoverished than before. Ultimately, the peace we so desperately seek is a reconnection with our own inner divinity, the indwelling of God's grace. It is a peace and a fullness that cannot be drawn from a barrel or poured from a bottle, but which resides, silent and patient, within the sanctum of the soul. The great sages of the past, from the Neoplatonist philosophers like Plotinus to the early Christian desert fathers, all spoke of the one true path to freedom and enlightenment. It is a path of discipline, prayer, and contemplation, one that does not depend on fleeting pleasures or temporary escapes. Plato, whose works were studied with reverence in medieval monasteries, described the soul's ascent to the divine as a process of liberating oneself from the shadows and illusions of the physical world. The Taoist master Lao Tzu, whose wisdom echoed in stories from the distant East, taught that true peace is found by living in harmony with the natural flow of the Tao, the divine order, not by fighting against it with excesses and escapism. On a psychological level, understood through the medieval lens of the four humors and spiritual afflictions, alcohol reinforces a dangerous pattern of emotional dependency. Men and women often do not seek the drink for pleasure alone, but as a desperate attempt to self-medicate, to numb the suffering of a melancholic or choleric temperament. It has a sedative effect that is powerfully appealing when one feels overwhelmed by life's trials. It offers a false solace, a momentary sense of escape from the world's frustrations. It acts as a temporary release valve for sorrows and fears, but it is a profoundly superficial solution. It does not heal the wound. It merely covers it with a dirty rag, allowing it to fester in the darkness. Rather than solving the problem, it postpones the necessary confrontation with our own inner demons, our own sins and shadows, thereby creating a vicious cycle of escape and a sorrowful return to an even deeper emptiness. True freedom, true happiness, the kind of joy that the saints speak of, is not found in the extremes of indulgence or in the harshness of self-denial alone, but in the virtuous middle path, in reconnecting with our spiritual essence, cultivating a life of balance and moderation, and nurturing the peace of a soul at rest in God's will. The real question is not the act of drinking itself, but the spiritual state that drives you to feel the need to drink. What sorrow, what fear, what emptiness makes you want to flee from the reality God has given you? Throughout the long, unfolding history of faith, countless spiritual masters, prophets, saints, and mystics have shared their divine insights on the nature of alcohol. Their words, preserved in hallowed texts and saintly biographies, carry the weight of divine wisdom, warning us of the hidden dangers of this common substance and its grave implications for our spiritual journey. These are not mere moralistic admonitions, but profound words of guidance rooted in a deep, pastoral love, intended to protect humanity's sacred connection to the divine. In the ancient Vedic traditions of the East, whose ideas sometimes found their way westward, alcohol is seen as a substance that diminishes sattva, the quality of purity, harmony, and light. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that a balanced, serene mind is absolutely essential for accessing higher planes of consciousness. Anything that disturbs this sacred equilibrium is an obstacle on the spiritual path. According to these traditions, consuming alcohol increases the qualities of rajas, restless, fiery passion, and tamas, darkness, ignorance, and inertia, destabilizing the practitioner and crippling their capacity for deep meditation and introspection. The Buddha, another great teacher from the East, explicitly warned in his Noble Eightfold Path of the dangers of all intoxicating substances. For him, consuming anything that clouds the mind is a direct impediment to spiritual progress, because it disconnects us from the pristine clarity required to perceive the ultimate truth of reality and achieve nirvana. In many Buddhist communities, abstinence from alcohol is a core part of sila, the code of ethical conduct. In the Hermetic and alchemical traditions that flourished in the hidden corners of the medieval world, alcohol was viewed with a profound ambivalence. While it was revered as a powerful agent capable of extracting essences and transforming matter, the aqua vitae, or water of life, it was also recognized as a dangerous, dual-edged symbol. It represented both the tantalizing possibility of illumination and the grave risk of becoming utterly lost in the world of material illusion. The alchemists warned that the reckless use of alcohol could lead to the degradation of the spiritual body, opening doorways in the soul for negative influences from the subtle, unseen realms to enter. A fascinating parallel comes from the Sufi traditions of mystical Islam. The great poet Rumi often used wine as a glorious metaphor in his verses, speaking of the wine of divine love, which intoxicates the soul with the overwhelming presence of God. However, he and other Sufi masters were careful to warn against the literal wine of the tavern, which they believed diverted the seeker from the true path of awakening. For the Sufis, true ecstasy, the ultimate intoxication, springs from a direct spiritual connection with the divine, never from an external substance. In Christianity, alcohol occupies its famously peculiar and paradoxical place. As we've seen, wine is the central symbol of the Eucharist. Yet, the early Christians, the Desert Fathers, and countless saints warned sternly of the mortal danger of excess. St. Augustine, in his Confessions, wrote of drunkenness as a murky pool of carnal self-indulgence, a form of self-willed destruction of the soul, an act that separates us from the grace of God. He saw excessive consumption as a vulgar distraction that pulls the soul away from introspection, prayer, and the contemplation of eternal truths. Other mystical accounts, from the visions of saints to the folklore of the common people, describe the dire spiritual consequences of the indiscriminate use of alcohol. In the surviving shamanic and pagan traditions that lingered in the wilder parts of Europe, alcohol was believed to weaken the light body, or the spiritual protection that keeps an individual in balance with the cosmos. Many of these folk healers and seers asserted that alcohol facilitates the entry of parasitic energies or malevolent entities that are drawn to and feed upon the low, chaotic vibrations generated by intoxication. All these diverse accounts, from the theologian's sermon to the alchemist's cryptic text, converge on a single, solemn warning: Alcohol can be a perilous tool, affecting not only the physical body, but the most subtle and sacred levels of our being. It disconnects us from what mystics call the axis mundi, the spiritual axis that aligns our soul with the heavens and the earth, enabling us to navigate both the physical and spiritual realms with clarity and purpose. When this divine alignment is broken, we lose our ability to access intuition, spiritual clarity, and the higher states of consciousness that are the birthright of every human soul. However, it must be said that not all accounts are purely warnings. Some spiritual traditions did recognize that in highly controlled, ritualistic contexts, and with the purest of intentions, alcohol could serve as a catalyst for altered states of perception. But they always stressed that this must be done with extreme caution, profound respect, and under the guidance of a true master. For the line between spiritual ecstasy and energetic degradation is razor-thin, a knife's edge on which it is all too easy to fall into ruin. Finally, let us recall the wisdom of the Greek philosopher Socrates, studied by medieval scholars, who claimed that self-mastery is the very key to a virtuous life. For him, the pursuit of balance was the foundation of all true philosophy and spiritual practice. By indulging in alcohol without control, we abdicate this sacred duty of self-mastery, leaving ourselves vulnerable to forces that cloud our reason and stain our immortal souls. These accounts and warnings from a bygone age are not meant to condemn, but to invite us to reflect. Does the ale or wine we consume in our moments of leisure and celebration truly uplift us, or does it pull us down into the mire? Does it connect us to the divine, or does it merely weave a convincing and deadly illusion of freedom? By heeding the wisdom of the great masters of the past, we can begin to see this common drink in a new, more sober light, as a symbol that challenges us to seek the only true intoxication, that of an awakened soul, filled with the pure light and consciousness of God. After exploring the secret origins of alcohol, its devastating impact on the spiritual body, the dark veil of illusion it creates, and the solemn mystical accounts that warn us of its dangers, we arrive at the most crucial crossroad on our journey. How do we break free from this powerful cycle? How can we transcend a dependency that may be physical, emotional, or spiritual, and rediscover a life of clarity, purpose, and connection with our own soul, without relying on this worldly emotional crutch? Liberation, or what the medieval Christian would call redemption, begins with awareness. It begins with the dawning recognition of the truth. When we truly understand, in the depths of our being, the impact of alcohol on our body, mind, and spirit, something profound within us awakens. This awareness is the first spark of transformation, the starting point for any real and lasting change. It is the moment we cease to act automatically, driven by habit, conditioning, or the simple pursuit of pleasure, and begin to question our choices with a sober heart. Why do we seek the cup? What emptiness are we truly trying to fill? The answer to these piercing questions often lies in that inner void, that sense of disconnection and spiritual homesickness that so many of us experience. Alcohol, like all other forms of worldly escapism, offers a temporary relief, a brief respite, but it never addresses the underlying cause of the pain. It is like a jester's mask we wear during moments of sorrow, but the mask must eventually come off, exposing our unresolved pains once more to the cold light of day. To break this cycle, we must have the courage to turn inward, where the real answers and the true healing lie. Spiritual practice is the most powerful path for this inward journey. Prayer, meditation on the scriptures, fasting, and other devotional techniques help to restore balance to the body and soul. They strengthen the spiritual fortress and reconnect us to our divine essence. As we cultivate an inner silence, our emotional wounds and sinful attachments naturally begin to surface, to be healed by God's grace. As these imbalances are neutralized, we begin to realize a profound and liberating truth. The peace we so desperately sought in the outside world has always been within us, a gift from our Creator, patiently waiting to be discovered. Many spiritual traditions offer specific practices for overcoming the sin of gluttony and the vice of addiction. In the Christian contemplative tradition, for instance, mindfulness of God's presence teaches us to observe our impulses and desires without being enslaved by them. Instead of reacting automatically to a craving, we learn to witness it, to offer it up in prayer, and to make a conscious choice for virtue. The concept of divine grace reminds us that we are not alone in this struggle. Higher support, the intercession of the saints and the strength of the Holy Spirit is always available to those who sincerely seek it. As the scriptures say, ask, and it shall be given to you. Reconnecting with God's creation, with nature, is also essential. Alcohol disrupts our natural harmony, and spending time in the solitude of forests, mountains, or by the sea helps to restore this lost connection. The energy of the earth itself is purifying and can help release the toxins, not just from the body, but from the mind and spirit as well. Another crucial step is the practice of gratitude. We often turn to drink as a way to escape what we perceive as a harsh or unsatisfactory reality. But by cultivating a heart of gratitude for what we have, for God's blessings even in the small things, we begin to see the profound beauty of the present moment. Gratitude connects us to the abundance of life and dissolves the spiritual emptiness we so often try to fill with external substances. I understand that these things are not as simple as they may sound. The path of redemption is often steep and strewn with obstacles, but everything, absolutely everything, begins with a single act of the will, an intention. My work here is simply to bring you the timeless message that you are not a slave to any substance or any sin. You are the master of your consciousness, a child of God, and you do not need any earthly substance to be happy and to live a fulfilled and virtuous life. Community, or fellowship, is also vital. Walking the path of liberation does not have to be a solitary pilgrimage. Surrounding yourself with people who share similar values and goals, the fellowship of your local parish, a pious confraternity, or even a few trusted, sober friends, can be transformative. They can offer support, inspiration, and encouragement during the most challenging times. Finally, we must cultivate forgiveness, especially forgiveness for ourselves, and seek absolution for our past failings. Many people struggle under the heavy weight of guilt or shame for their past choices involving alcohol. But as the great mystic Rumi said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Our imperfections, our sins, and our mistakes are part of our journey. It is through them, and through God's infinite mercy, that we learn, grow, and are made stronger. Breaking free from the cycle of alcohol is not merely about abandoning a substance. It is about embracing an entirely new way of living, a freer, more virtuous, more aligned way of being that reflects our true nature as beings created for eternal glory. Visualize this transformation as a great tree reborn in the spring. Even after the cold and dormancy of a long winter of sin, life returns with an unstoppable vigor, filling the branches with green leaves and sweet fruit. So it is with our soul. When we choose to free ourselves from this cycle, with God's help, it is a rebirth, an opportunity to bloom again, stronger, more aware, and more deeply connected to the divine essence within us. Alcohol may have been a long shadow that fell across our path, but shadows only exist because there is a light. By choosing liberation, we choose to turn and walk towards that light, towards our truth, towards our God. The question remains, a question that echoes through the ages and into your own heart right now. Are you ready to take this step? Are you ready to look beyond what the world offers in a cup and discover the infinite source of peace, joy, and clarity that has always been waiting for you within? Thank you for watching.